Father Augustine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. I know that it's really early over there, and I just want to get the pronunciation of the city right. Is it Norcia or Nursia?
Norcia.
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 Perfect. Spanish, Italian is very close, but still there are several different things that I'm like, yeah, this is different. Thank you for taking the time. I mean, we were talking before we started the recording that you've been up for 3 hours. So, life of the monk. Sometimes I feel like in a way, as a husband and father, I also have the bells that call me, not necessarily to prayer, but my children wake up sometimes at odd hours of the night. So there's not quite the same, but waking up in the middle of the night.
That's some prayer in its own regard, I think, right, Father? It could be constituted as sacrificial love. So
that's right, and that's what God's calling you to do right then is attend to your children and help them go back to sleep or deal with their fever, and you can also pray when you're holding them and trying to get them to go back to sleep. It's not that they're incompatible.
Yeah,
that's true. So, Father, for those that don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you end up being a Benedictine monk in Italy, and how was that like?
Sure. So I'm originally from South Carolina. I grew up not Catholic, and we went to church a little bit, but I wouldn't really say that I was very Christian or even religious. So a pretty kind of normal, if you will, secular upbringing. But for high school, my parents, they wanted to send me to a good school. So they sent me to nearby Catholic school for high school. And the main desire was to have a good education, which is good. But at the Catholic school, there was also religion class. So I was exposed to the scriptures and the faith. And at first I thought, this is all very strange. And how can anyone believe all of this? It's crazy. I mean, it is crazy. That is, it's not just a purely natural, rational religion. It's really supernatural. Yes. And so if you don't have faith, it doesn't make sense. Right. But then the sophomore year of high school, we started studying church history, reading about the church fathers, the doctors, the different early saints and their witness, the martyrs. And I started to kind of come around and say, gosh, maybe this is real. It's Christ has impacted and changed the lives of so many millions of people. And that was very beautiful. We also read St. Augustine's Confessions.
Okay.
And that work really, really spoke to me, really moved me. And so I then sort of started to believe, and I thought, gosh, this is true. But then it still took more time to kind of really want to make the commitment and plunge, take the plunge and live the faith. But then thanks to God's grace and my cooperation with it, I entered the church in my junior year of high school. Then for college, I went to Thomas Aquinas College in California, studied great books, liberal arts, and had a very, very good, beautiful experience there, living in a small Catholic community, studying great things, the truth, and trying to learn more about reality and about God and myself too. And that was very good. Had a girlfriend at the beginning in freshman year, and that went well, but I realized that I hadn't really done kind of proper discernment. I hadn't figured out what my vocation was. And her father said to me, "Are you sure that you're not supposed to become a priest?" And I wasn't really sure. I hadn't thought about it that well or that seriously. And I realized that I just wasn't quite ready to kind of move forward and continue in that relationship. So we stopped seeing each other. But then the chaplain at the college, he said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Do you want to become a religious, become a priest, or get married?" And I said, "I don't know. They both, they all seem pretty good." And he said, "Well, then you should do the one that's objectively speaking better and higher and more likely to make you a saint." So I said, "Okay, that makes sense. That's a good argument." And then the next step was to go see and to figure out, is this my vocation? Like, do I have a religious vocation? So then I visited some different communities, and I first came to Norcia after my sophomore year of college. Spent a month here in the summer, and had a very, very beautiful, moving experience. I really saw that God was calling me here to help me grow in my faith, and also really begin to work on some of my struggles, some of my sins. Everyone has baggage from growing up, things that they kind of receive from others, but also that they accumulate through their own actions. And I really was quite convinced that God wanted me to work on those things, work on myself, and really grow closer to Him here at this monastery. So I went back, finished school, and then joined the monastery a couple months after graduation.
What year was that?
I studied Italian right after graduation because I knew I was coming to Italy and wanted to be able to speak to people.
Locals, yeah. And in what year did you go to begin your novitiate?
So I entered the monastery in 2013.
2013. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of Father Cassian Folsom. I think that he has such a gravitas to his voice, and he is such a great preacher. I have listened to some of his talks on YouTube, and he just has like this. He exudes like this holiness, to me at least, that makes me want to do better with my walk of faith and growing closer to the Lord. So he was in Indiana, but then moved to Rome to start the monastery, I guess is a way to put it, in 1988. Would you happen to know a little bit more of what was the motivation to go back to the birthplace of Saint Benedict to have monks again there?
Sure. So yeah, like you said, we started out in Rome, but very quickly it became clear that well, when you read the monastic history, you kind of see most monasteries are in deserted, removed places. That is, they're usually not in cities or bustling metropolises. Monks really need a bit of peace and silence, and so that became pretty clear to us quite quickly that it's difficult to have a monastery in a big city. And I really think, God and Saint Benedict wanted us here. So there was the ancient monastery that's built over the birthplace of Saint Benedict had just been restored. Some work had just been finished, and it was empty. And we were looking for a place. And so God really, was a matchmaker and brought those two things together. And it's very beautiful to be able to be at the birthplace of Saint Benedict and be the guardians and custodians of the house where he was born and the town in the town where he grew up.
Wow, that is insane to think of. You are encrusted in a piece of history of the Catholic Church. Gustavo
of the world, right?
Yeah. I mean, literally, we have done episodes on how monasticism built Western civilization and how we are big fans of monks in general, but in Benedictine monks in particular. I actually tried and failed to create a blog based specifically in the rule, going one by one on it. I lasted until like maybe like the 10th or 12th rule, and then abandoned it in lieu of this podcast.
That's pretty good.
Thank you. But it has a lot of like wisdom for even, you know, married men that are living their vocation, because there are things that you can apply to daily life that maybe people think like, well, that's just for the monks living in the monastery. But my wife is like, we cannot have like a monastery at home. Have you heard how loud your children are? I'm like, yes, I know. I'm a big fan of the silence, and a little bit envious. But so okay, so it's 2013. You are in Norcia, and a year before you entered the monastery, Birra Nursia became a thing. And that's one of the things that I'm really interested to know a little bit more about the history. First off, what was your first job in the brewery?
Sure. So I'll start with a little preface. That is, I think this is also part of divine providence. In high school, young kids are interested in different things, and I, for some reason, developed an interest in homebrewing. So
came in handy,
and not just so I could drink alcohol, but it's really kind of a neat blend of cooking and science, and you get to really create something it's very special. And a lot of Americans do it. It's quite popular in the United States. So we did homebrewing, and I continued to do that through college. And then when I visited the monastery in 2011, they were thinking about, opening the brewery, but it hadn't happened yet. That is, they were kind of planning and doing some small test recipes and things like that. And then I really kind of in my heart knew I wanted to join before the brewery opened. So I didn't join because the monastery has a brewery. But I think it was sort of part of providence that, I was kind of called at a certain time when, eventually I would take a pretty big role in the brewery later on. But when I first joined, that is, when people first joined, they usually aren't given too much work because they need to focus on prayer. They need to focus on their classes, their formation as monks, and also their academic spiritual formation. So at first, I had many different jobs. I helped set up for meals. I helped polish candlesticks. I did different things, cleaning. Then I did get involved in the brewery pretty early on as well, as kind of an assistant, helping with the bottling days, putting the bottles on the conveyor belt, taking them off, making boxes, filling the boxes with beer. More the packaging, preparing of bottles and the shipments to send out. And then that sort of continued, and I've been working in the brewery ever since.
Nice. Well, so it seems like divine providence pretty much set up the stage for, you were ordained in 2018. Is that right?
I took my psalm vows, my final vows in 2018.
Is that different
That's right,
from ordination to the priesthood?
That's right. So, as religious, as monks, as religious, our main thing that defines us is the vows that we take. So, the traditional vows for most religious orders is poverty, chastity, and obedience. You've probably heard of those. And most religious, that is, all religious take those, and monks do as well. But Benedictines actually have they have some special vows that they take as well. One is stability, which means you vow to remain in the monastery for your whole life and not move around. That is, you remain in this monastery as your family, as your place where God's calling you to seek your salvation. And also you vow to continue your conversion of life. So you're making a public promise to God in front of everyone that you will continue to fight and to strive to cooperate with his grace and become a saint. So we all take those vows. In your formation, you have your novitiate, and then you take temporary vows, which only last for 3 years. And then, God willing, after that time period, you take your final vows, which are for life. And then some monks become priests, and some don't. That is, the main kind of core of our vocation is to be a monk. And then God and the superior then calls some men to become priests as well. But that's something that usually comes afterwards, and you have to do further studies. And it depends on the needs of the monastery, whether they need more priests. It depends on you, and whether you want to do it, and the superior thinks that you have the additional qualities that would be suited for the priesthood. So it kind of depends.
Gotcha. Sorry, I jumped the gun on that, but this is a very good differentiation. Thank you for making that clarification. So I have tasted both the Bionda and the Extra beers, and for those that don't know, could you tell us a little bit more about the two styles of beer? What was the decision for making like a Belgian style beer versus like other styles of beer, and a little bit of the tradition of beer making in the Catholic Church?
Sure. Yeah, so we before we opened the brewery, we had a gift shop in town in Norcia, and we sold monastic beer like Chimay, some of the other Trappist beers, and they always sold very well, and people liked them because they're very good. And we would sometimes drink them as well on feast days, Sundays and feast days. We would drink them usually at dinner as a kind of special treat for us. So those beers were kind of part of our life even before we had a brewery. The monastic brewing tradition is basically kind of centered in Belgium, and it seemed like the logical kind of fit for us, Belgian style beer, to kind of harmonize with the previous monastic brewing tradition. We also we wanted the beer to pair with and complement the rich culinary tradition of Norcia. Norcia is a very old town. It's a Roman kind of outpost town that is quite old, and it has a very, very long tradition of making salami, making different cured meats and things like that. They would keep the pigs up here in the mountains because there are lots of forests with acorns and things for the pigs to eat. So Norcia is very famous in Italy even for its salami, for its prosciutto, also for black truffle, which is quite an expensive delicacy and very tasty as well. So Norcia already had this strong kind of tradition of very, very good food. And we wanted to do something to support ourselves that paired with and complemented this tradition, but didn't compete with it directly. So we didn't start making our own salami, also because we don't eat meat as monks. According to the rule, we don't eat meat. But we also didn't want to compete with the town. We wanted to kind of create something that was a collaboration and something that enriched the whole town, and also was something that the different restaurants and meat shops could sell and also have a little bit of profit for themselves. So the neat thing about Norcia is it's quite cold here. It's up in the mountains to 800 meters above sea level, so about 2,400 feet. And they don't really grow wine here. There's not a commercial wine growing presence. Tuscany, even other parts of our province of Umbria, they're very good wines, but in Norcia, they don't. So we kind of had this idea, well, why don't we create a drink that can pair with the food and isn't wine, because wine doesn't work here. Let's make beer, because we're monks. So it all kind of just fell into place like that. And we chose to call the beer Birra Nursia, to emphasize this link with the town. Nursia is the town name Norcia in Latin. So St. Benedict would have known this town as Nursia. So we chose the name specifically for that, because we didn't want the beer just to be for us, but to be something that we share with the town, and we really use to strengthen the roots of our monastery and kind of the whole culture in this place. So that's
a symbiotic relationship between the place and the time and the community
and that really upholds the tradition of being in the outskirts, right? Because Saint Benedict fled, not fled, but he left a very populated and very crumbly Rome to be a hermit, to be away. In that sense, I think obviously you guys are still living that tradition, but really making the most out of your geographic location and providing, like you said, that complementary touch to a very active culinary scene. I would call it, based on what you're describing. Can't wait to try it though. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Norcia in Italy is quite famous, and in fact, they call all the kind of cured meat salami shops Norcinerie, that is Norcia shops.
Oh, wow.
Because Norcia is really where kind of, one might say, where it all started, and a lot of Italians in the summertime, especially, they come to Norcia for the food. They come here to eat. They also come up to the mountains because it's a little bit cooler at night. Around Rome, it's very hot in the summer and humid, and you can't sleep well at night because it's so hot. And Italians have an interesting aversion to air conditioning. They generally speaking don't approve of it, and they think it's bad for you and will get you sick and things like that. And maybe they're right. I don't know. But
that was a culture shock for sure. When my wife and I were in Assisi, it was like, where's the AC? I was like, you open the window, that's your AC.
Yeah. No, in the Mediterranean climate, it does cool off at night somewhat. But they like to come up to the mountains in the summertime and cool off and eat well, because that's one of the most important things for Italians is eating well.
Meals. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was like Mexicans. We were both Mexicans, so we can relate to that definitely. Okay, so I have in front of me the tasting notes of the Bionda. I'm more interested in the food pairings. Not that you gave that information about what it is. So starters and first courses with cheese and vegetables, spinach and ricotta tart, artichoke tortellini, a top taleggio fondue. Hopefully I said that right. Oven cooked with meats, pizzas, Four Seasons, white pizza with artichokes and cured ham.
Look at that.
Oh,
beautiful.
Look at that beauty. One other thing I forgot to mention is you see the name here, Nursia, but also up here is the rose window of the Basilica of St. Benedict. So we kind of chose as part of our logo and motto this link with the birthplace of St. Benedict as well. So this is as you were saying, this is the Bionda beer. Generally speaking, what I tell people, especially people who don't know a lot about beer, is that you want to drink this beer when you might want to have white wine. So it goes better with lighter foods, lighter appetizers, pastas with cream sauces, fish, chicken, turkey, anything that's not too heavy. This goes very well. It's as we said, it's a Belgian style ale. It's got I would say a nice hop flavor profile, but it's not super bitter. It's not like an IPA. That is, we use in both of our beers, we use European style hops, which are a little bit more discreet and kind of subtle. They do contribute nice flavors, but they don't have the kind of over the top punch you in the face citrus kind of mean flavors of the American hops that they use in IPAs, which are also very good beers. I like those very much as well. But the emphasis for these beers is drinkability and kind of a crisp, refreshing character that will, go well with the food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like the U.S. there's a craze. Everyone is doing IPAs and hazies and all this stuff, and like, can we just tone it down a little bit? Like everybody has 5 different kinds of APAs, IPAs,
Right.
and 120 IBUs.
Right.
And
that's a lot of
like,
IBUs.
why? Why do you want to taste resin when you drink your beer?
Right.
I mean, I do enjoy them, but come on,
Right.
everything in moderation.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk a little bit about the other beer that you produce in the monastery, the Extra?
Sure. So I have that here too. This is the Extra with the blue label. It's called Extra because it's extra good or extra strong. You can kind of fill in the adjective there. This is a dark beer. It's 10%, but we also use sugar. We use some candy caramel, caramelized sugar when we brew it. And so the effect of that is the yeast in the fermentation eats all of the sugar and creates alcohol. So while it's 10%, it's also not too heavy because the sugar doesn't add too much heavy body to the beer. It can still remain kind of lean and clean and drinkable. Now, that said, it is a strong beer, so you have to be careful. Don't drink this beer on an empty stomach. Pair with food, also split it with a friend. That's what we usually recommend to people. But the Extra is a dark beer. It has some nice fruit and dark berry notes, a little bit of cocoa, caramel character as well, spices, but it's not like a stout. It's not heavy. It's not this, tar oil in your mouth. It's quite crisp
still
and drinkable, yet very and refreshing. Also a little bit sweet. It does have a kind of a sweet taste. And this beer, both of our beers are good anytime with anything, but we usually say this beer's better with, heavier like meats, red sauce pasta, anything that needs a little bit more strength in the drink that's being paired with it. So normally, if you want to drink red wine, you can swap that out with the Birra Extra and you won't go wrong. And it's also a great dessert beer, to have with chocolate cake or tiramisu. You can kind of enjoy it at the end of the meal as well.
It doesn't overpower the other compliments as well. So
that's right. Yeah,
I'm sold. I'm yeah, I know. Me too. This is a hard episode right now. I'm more partial to the darker beers. I like, and it's depending on the time of the year. Yeah, if it's summer, I enjoy a lighter beer with
right.
That's something more refreshing. And my wife is big about eating seasonally, and she's always trying to get us to okay, we're gonna eat more stews. Obviously, when it's a little hot, like colder. My mom, obviously Mexican cook, she will cook a hot stew in the middle of July, and she's like, "That's what we're having,"
right.
And but in terms of like beers, I prefer, I can drink a dark beer even if it's summer, and I'll enjoy it just as well as I do in the fall.
Yeah.
So that's my go-to right there. I would love to try both of them. I haven't. So Walter, you can be the judge there.
I mean, it's been a while since I had him, but because I've been following the Monks since like the release of the 2015, which we'll touch in a minute, the album that you recorded. But let's finish talking about beer. Do you taste banana with the Belgian yeast that is used in beer, or is that just like some people taste banana and some people don't taste banana?
No, it can definitely be there. It depends on the yeast variety. The banana is not too, I wouldn't say it's very strong in our beer. That is, the yeast in the fermentation eats the different sugars from the malt, that are there from the brew. And when it eats those sugars, it creates carbon dioxide gas, it creates alcohol, and it also kind of like creates these other flavors. like we kind of have some byproducts from the digestion that we have. The yeast also create different gases and flavors, but the ones from the yeast taste and smell good.
And we bottle them and sell them to people.
That's right. Yeah, but the banana flavor is quite characteristic of Belgian style yeasts. That is, Belgian style yeasts usually like to ferment at a pretty warm temperature compared to other yeast strains, and they produce kind of proportionally a lot more flavor. And so, what's very interesting about Belgian style beers is you have a lot of flavor and complexity and nuance from the yeast. Whereas a lager beer, like a lot of the German style beers, they're much more clean, kind of, and what you're tasting is the malt and the hops, and the yeast adds very, very, very little usually. What's also neat about our beers is they're re-fermented in the bottle. So that means when we bottle them, we add a little bit more sugar and a little bit of fresh yeast, and then the yeast eat that sugar and carbonate the beer naturally in the bottle.
Wow.
Kind of like the way champagne is made. That helps preserve the beer. Sorry?
Okay. So that is how you get carbonation in the bottle? Because I've known that that method is like one of like several different ways of doing it, but I didn't know that it would preserve it for longer.
Well, it helps the secondary fermentation, they call it, the fermentation in the bottle helps remove any oxygen that might be there, and that helps preserve the beer, prevent oxidation later on. But it also adds another layer of complexity of flavor, which you don't get in beers where they're carbonated in the tank from CO2 gas from a big tank. That's fine, and those beers are good, but when you re-ferment in the bottle, you get more flavor and more complexity. And over time, the beer then will kind of evolve and improve and change.
Like a champagne or a wine, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, that's right. Although, generally speaking, even our beer, it's better fresher. You could hold on to it for 10 years, but it would be very different, and not everyone would enjoy it like that. Some people would, like the dark beer at 10 years. And I had pretty recently one from maybe 2012, 2013, and it was good, but it was different, it does change over time. And as a brewer, I usually like to drink our beers fresh. But the other interesting thing is in Italy, we sell more of the blonde than the extra. That is, Italians generally like lighter, clearer beers. But in the United States, we sell equal amounts of the blonde and extra. And sometimes we sell even more extra than blonde because people want a complex, interesting, strong beer.
Yeah, I would say like when you mentioned the German styles of beer, like your Pilsners and your Doppelbocks and all these other lagers that are very crisp, very clean, very refreshing, but you're not tasting a lot of anything.
Right.
They're very drinkable, but you can knock them down and not be like, well, did you taste dark berries or anything? Like, no, it's beer. Just drink the beer.
Yeah.
But if you want something a little bit more character and a little bit more like you're drinking a little bit of history, and maybe Nursia, Birra Nursia would be the
good.
the option.
You got it. That's right. That's how you say it.
So I have to say that I'm glad that you guys went the Belgian route, because I had beer in Italy and I like their wine better than their beer. With Birra Moretti, not necessarily that great. It's definitely an acquired taste. Not to trash talk Italian beer, but let's just say that they do other things better.
Yeah, they don't have a beer kind of tradition and culture. There are actually a lot of craft breweries in Italy. More craft breweries in Italy than in Belgium.
Oh, really?
Which is surprising, but it's a tradition that's kind of just starting to kind of take root and evolve. That is, Italians didn't brew historically, they would make wine, you know. But it's starting to change, and some Italian craft breweries are making very good beers, but we're a little, you know, we're kind of behind the rest of the world and behind the United States. I think the thing Italy has to work on now is develop styles that are Italian. So, you know, an Italian craft brewery can copy an American IPA and even do it well, and that's not bad, but that's not exactly an Italian beer in the sense it's not rooted in the kind of tradition of the place.
Or like a German beer.
Our beers, that's right. Yeah, you know, they can brew beers well, but you know, over time, I hope that the beer culture and scene here will kind of become its own thing and not just copy the trends from the United States or wherever.
Right.
But Italy's now kind of getting interested in its own malt production, its own barley production for the malt, and also growing its own hops. And some of the Italian hops that I've tried are quite good. That is, they're different. Even if it's the same variety, they taste different, but they're very nice. And we actually have started using some Italian hops in our beers. It's the same variety, but instead of being grown in Czech Republic, it's grown in Italy, and the quality is very high.
That's great.
Oh wow, this is where the terroir is going to come into place for. Wow, that's
right.
So interesting. It's such a world of like things that when you get into it, the more and more you learn, the more and more you are fascinated. Like you said, it's a great Venn diagram of cooking and science. So let's talk about, in 2016, there was a 6.2 earthquake that affected central Italy, all the region of Umbria, and destroyed so many ancient buildings. How bad was it? Because I don't know, 6.2 in the Richter scale it's pretty bad. How bad it is?
Yeah. Well, there were actually two earthquakes. There was one in August that hit the town of Amatrice, which is only about 30 miles from here. It flattened the whole town, the whole historic center. Oh, wow. And I think about 350, 400 people died. Oh, my goodness. That was in August, and that was very tragic. There was also a lot of damage here in Norcia, and so we had to close the basilica that was our church, and about half of the monastery was condemned and closed, even in August. Then Norcia had another earthquake in October 30th, and the epicenter was in Norcia of that earthquake. I think they were both above 6 on the Richter scale. We had already moved out of town and were living on a mountainside property that we had purchased a few years before. But we definitely felt the earthquake in our cabins that we had constructed. And we came out and we saw the huge dust cloud over Norcia. And when it cleared, we saw that the bell tower of our basilica was gone. And you know, we knew then that it was very, very bad and very serious. But we think kind of a miracle, a grace of divine providence was that in the Norcia earthquake, no one died.
Thanks be to God.
We had already been hit by one a few months before, so a lot of people were living in trailers, living in, you know, even tents, because they didn't want to live in their homes because they knew another earthquake could come, and a lot of their homes were already compromised. So that, and then also I think just, you know, grace and Saint Benedict's intercession saved us, and no one died, which it's really strange and really kind of a miracle. There are some interesting stories of someone was standing right here, and then for some strange reason they walked a few yards to the left, and then the earthquake hit and a huge rock fell right where they were standing, you know. Or they were in their house and they went to the next room, the earthquake hit, and the part of the house where they were, like, all fell out into the street, you know, 2 stories down.
Wow.
There's some kind of crazy stories like that. But so, like I said, we were up here when the second earthquake hit. All the priests of the monastery went down to town immediately because we thought for sure, there are people who are dying who need absolution, need to be anointed. There wasn't, but the priest then did help rescue some of the people that were trapped, and some of the sisters in town, the Poor Clares, they were sort of stuck in their convent, and so we helped the firefighters get them out, because we knew that they were there. And then the rest of us were up here on the mountainside, kind of watching and praying.
Wow. And I've received the newsletter from the prior, and it has been amazing to see all the progress that has happened since 2016. I think in 2018, Father Cassian stopped being the prior, and then now you have a new prior, Father Benedict Nivakov. I hope I got his last name right. It's just a small question. What's the difference between a priory and a monastery? Are they interchangeable?
Sure. So monastery is kind of like the genus, the umbrella term. Any place where monks live is a monastery. That's in opposition or in distinction from a convent. A convent would be where friars or Franciscans, Dominicans live. But monasteries are where monks live. And then under monasteries, generally speaking, there's priories and abbeys. And usually a monastery starts out as a priory, and in its sort of process of growth and maturing and getting bigger and more established, it'll eventually, God willing, become an abbey. So most of the kind of older, bigger historic monasteries in Europe and in the United States even are abbeys.
That makes sense.
And a priory is just sort of like on the way. Yeah, we're in the end, we're all monks. Right. That's sort of the kind of critical thing.
So this reconstruction effort, it also included a 16th century church at Santa Maria Misericordiae, which was one of the buildings that didn't get as affected as the other buildings in town. Was that in the property that you mentioned that you moved out after the August earthquake?
That's right. So there's this property a couple miles outside of town on the mountainside. It's an old Capuchin Franciscan convent, actually. And we purchased it before the earthquake, and we weren't quite sure what we wanted to do with it. Maybe use it as a kind of a summer retreat getaway place, because even in Norcia in the summer, there's lots of people, and we experienced they like to have even concerts and like discoteca, they call it, DJs all night in the main piazza of Norcia, right outside of the basilica and the monastery. So usually by the time all the music stopped, we were getting up to go pray. So we kind of had a desire for even more silence and solitude, and we bought this property. But then thankfully we had the property when the earthquake hit, and we first lived in the garden in a big tent, and then built some temporary structures and kind of, established ourselves up here after the earthquake. The church was standing. It was not in very good shape, but we had begun restoring it even before the earthquake. So we had consolidated some of the pillars and some of the vaulting, and that is really why it remained on its feet and the roof did not cave in when the earthquakes hit. It was the only church in Norcia that still had a roof after the earthquakes. So
did you take your final vows in the temporary church that you built?
Yeah, in the wooden chapel.
I mean, it's a really beautiful wooden chapel, by the way.
No, it's very nice, and what's really cool too is we built a lot of that ourselves. We had help from friends and volunteers that wanted to help us, but we did a lot of the work for building that kind of wooden mini monastery ourselves in the first year after the earthquake, and that was a hard thing. It was a big challenge, and there was a lot of suffering in that time after the earthquake, but it also was very beautiful for us as a community. It helped really bring us together and really unite our community spirit, working in that common project and kind of really starting over with not very much. We were able to recuperate some of our things from the town, but all the buildings had to be, built from scratch. And we're very grateful though for all the help that we had from benefactors all over the world. We really relied on a lot of help, and we still do for the continuing reconstruction.
Talk about Ora and Labora at a very high level. Okay, so for people that are at home listening or watching this, if they want to help the Monks of Norcia, what can they do to support the monks?
Sure. Well, we have a monastery website, so you can go onto our website, nursia.org, and you can make a donation to the monastery, and that's one way to help. We are especially kind of grateful and rely on regular monthly donations. So even if it's something very small, like $5, $10 a month, just the kind of regularity of that is very helpful for planning, and we really kind of need regular supporters. It doesn't have to be a lot, but every little bit helps. And the important thing is it's continuous and regular. You can also buy some of our beer. We, of course, get some of the proceeds from the sales of the beer. We have an American online store where you buy the beer and it gets shipped to your house, which is quite nice. That's the only way really to get it in the United States right now. And we can ship to about 42 states. There's a few that put up too many barriers and make it difficult, but most states we can get our beer there. And so many friends and supporters of the monastery buy our beer, and they of course, I hope enjoy the beer as well, but they also get some satisfaction knowing that they're helping the monks. And what's also very neat is they have the beer, and then usually they share it with friends or when they have people over, and so then they can kind of tell the story about the monastery, or when I went to Norcia in 2015 and met the monks and had the beer, and it really becomes a conversation piece.
Part of hospitality, Benedictine
the
hospitality.
beer is that's right, yeah. And we created it really so that people would enjoy it with friends and family. Alcohol in general is something that helps relationships and conversation and communion. Consumed in moderation, it can be a helpful and a good thing. And we're really happy that people can spread the word about the monastery with the beer, and also we hope come closer to each other and closer to God through it.
And I don't know. We touched on Benedicta, Marian Chant from Norcia, which is an excellent album, by the way. Those chants, I don't remember the name of the musical director in the monastery, but that has been one of my favorite albums to put, just to like get into the mood of praying. Like Tota Pulcra es Maria. My goodness. I know that you do that as your daily life and you live that, but from a layman, that is just it leads you closer to heaven. It's all I'm gonna say. So check it out. Check the album as well. It was recorded by De Montfort Music, who has recorded the Benedictines of Mary, Queen of Apostles, the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist. So very high quality recordings and such great voices. I'm just gonna leave it at that. I'm fanboying right now.
No, the tradition of the chant is very beautiful, and part of the reason I became a monk is because I too was really drawn by the beauty of Gregorian chant. And what's beautiful about Gregorian chant is it kind of teaches you through the music what prayer should feel like. That is, it kind of creates the dispositions in your body through the music. You know, music is something that it's rational, but it also hits you on a sub-rational level. It kind of enters into your soul and your body, and it really kind of forms you and teaches you. I think the Holy Spirit really has written this music to make you know what prayer and kind of communion with God should feel like. And that's what's so unique and special about it.
Well, it also separates you from the ordinary, right? I mean, the fact that we're bombarded by not very good music on a daily basis, to just and we've had this conversation about how a reverent mass with chanting or with like proper hymns elevate you and take you away from the ordinary that you hear every day, and really get you closer to God in that sense. And it's we're led by beauty, right? We're attracted by it, and the same thing at our home parish. When the first time that we went there for a mass, there wasn't necessarily Gregorian chant, but it was a very beautiful choir singing that was just like, you felt different when you walked into that church. The environment, it was very inviting to just lift the soul to God. And yeah, I'm very grateful for everything that you do. And the same with your beer. You know, it's like you said, it's about creating a product that really makes us come together and enjoy each other's company and the company of God.
Well, Father, this has been a fantastic conversation. We really appreciate how generous you've been with your time today. And there's if you could give our listeners your blessing, that would be fantastic.
Benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et maneat semper. Amen.
Amen.
God bless you.
Thanks again.
I'll pray for you guys and for all the listeners, and we also ask you to pray for us. We're monks, and you think, oh, we're holy, but we also need your prayers. So please pray for us as well.
Thank you so much for your time.
You got it. Thank you, Father.
Thank you. Have a good evening, and make sure to order the beer. Even Walter, I think you need to try it again.
And, yes. We'll make a tasting video of it and put it on YouTube.
Great. I look forward to seeing that.
Thank you so much, Father.
Thanks, guys. Take care. God bless you.